This year's deadline saw a flurry of trades, especially at the 11th hour, closing in on 3 o'clock, and a bunch of trades the night before, including the Washington Capitals trading superstar defenseman John Carlson to the Anaheim Ducks. We also saw the Leafs sell off a couple of their pieces, including Scott Laughton, Bobby McMahon, and Nick Waugh. More on that and more to come on the Chris Morana Show Deadline Day Review. The Leafs ended up getting back a couple picks, some of them good, like a first and a fifth for Nick Waugh. Others not so good, like only a conditional third for Scott Laughton and only a second and fourth for Bobby McMahon, who was rumored to go for a first round pick. Brad Treliving made a great start to the deadline by getting a first for Nicholas Waugh. And the other two, I think he shit the bed. I think he really turned this team into something that is not going to be watchable for the rest of the season. But he also didn't sell off the pieces enough to the point where he recouped enough assets for this deadline. The idea going into this deadline is that it was going to be a retooling deadline. You were going to get pieces back that you could either then flip, or you were going to move a piece that could get you a guy like a Robert Thomas in this trade deadline, or something of note, something that is a roster shakeup. Now, I think what we need to start off with for this deadline is the Maple Leafs deadline. You can obviously tell by my background, I'm a huge Leafs fan. And to say that this deadline was a disappointment would be an understatement. The Leafs ended up giving up Scott Laughton, Bobby McMahon, and Nicholas Waugh, all trading them away to the Avs, Kings, and the Seattle Kraken, respectively. The Leafs ended up getting back a couple picks, some of them good, like a first and a fifth for Nick Waugh. Others not so good, like only a conditional third for Scott Laughton and only a second and fourth for Bobby McMahon, who was rumored to go for a first round pick. Brad Treliving made a great start to the deadline by getting a first for Nicholas Waugh. And the other two, I think he shit the bed. I think he really turned this team into something that is not going to be watchable for the rest of the season. But he also didn't sell off the pieces enough to the point where he recouped enough assets for this deadline. The idea going into this deadline is that it was going to be a retooling deadline. You were going to get pieces back that you could either then flip, or you were going to move a piece that could get you a guy like a Robert Thomas in this trade deadline. Or you didn't get any of that. You got a conditional first round pick, which most likely is going to be a high pick. Now, it is in 2027 from the Colorado Avalanche, but in all cases scenario, like thinking about everything, they're going to be contending for a Stanley Cup next year, meaning that pick is going to be roughly between 25 and 32. If I'm Kyle Dubas, I'm trading that pick down for a second and a fifth, like he used to do. I don't see that pick being valuable for the Leafs. I'm sorry. There's been reports and studies that show that late first rounders and second round picks aren't really that much different. Once you get between the 25 to 100, there's not that much change between how a player is going to develop. It's not very different. Now, in terms of rest of season, the Maple Leafs have one job: tank to the bottom. You're going to go to the bottom of the Atlantic. You're going to be sinking like the Titanic. You're not even winning the race to the bottom because Florida's got you beat right now. You're not winning the bottom race to the East because the Rangers have you beat right now. And you're not winning the bottom to the overall standings because Vancouver has you beat by a landslide. Vancouver has 40 points. The Leafs are in the middle of the 60s. Vancouver would not only need to win a bunch of games, but Toronto would have to lose out, essentially. This is one of the most disappointing results for a franchise I think I've ever seen. From cup aspirations for about 9 straight years, let's call it what it is, to the furthest you go is round 2, and now you're left with a coach who doesn't want to be there, albeit he won't say it, the players who don't want the coach there, a GM who's scared to make trades until the 11th hour of the trade deadline, and a president who's managing about 4 other sports teams alongside yours, all while going through a ownership change. With the amount of change going on in the organization and the amount of change coming down the pipeline for this organization, there are so many questions with the Leafs that I don't even know where to begin. Where's Matthews' head at come off season? Where's Morgan Riley going to play? What are you doing with the goaltending? What are you doing with the coaching staff? What are you doing with the management staff? Are you bringing in a president? These are all questions that need to be answered. There was some talk about Doug Armstrong potentially coming to join the Maple Leafs organization, either as GM or president. If you look at the Blues right now, do you have any appetite for Doug Armstrong coming onto this franchise? I don't. They're talking about it as if it's like a Lou Lamoriello, Kyle Dubas scenario. And I don't want to do that again. I'm so sorry. We've been down that road with a young GM. And I don't think, as much as a young GM would definitely be a great fresh set of eyes, because GMs in this league are stubborn, I want to say that would help. You've already been down that road. If you look at the Penguins' deadline and what the moves that they've been making, Kyle Dubas looks like a genius, which is quite frankly what I thought of him as a Maple Leaf. His trades made perfect sense when he traded for Jake McCabe and Sam Lafferty. He made a trade for Mark Giordano. He made great trades. He ended up doing the Ryan O'Reilly trade, which quite frankly, they came out with a great trade, albeit he left in free agency. It was a great trade at the time. They didn't have to give up any major prospects. They gave up a first, and I think it was a second round pick, maybe. I don't remember entirely, but that's what it costs for a captain, especially a caliber player like Ryan O'Reilly was at that time. And he did his job during the playoffs. He got us over the hump out of the 19-year curse. Kyle Dubas was not the problem. Sure, I didn't agree with everything that he did in terms of the team. There was a lot that I did agree with what he did. And now this flip to Brad Treliving has flipped this franchise on its head. And it's now sunk them to out of the playoffs and bottoming out for a top 5 pick just to keep a conditional draft pick that you traded last trade deadline in a panic move for Brandon Carlo, who, mind you, was in trade rumors the entire season because he sucks. And you gave up Fraser Minton and that first round pick for. This GM sits on his hands quite a bit. And I've noticed that when it comes to a lot of what he's done. You look at the year that they brought in Domi and Bertuzzi. That was Brad Treliving. Not many people know that. That was Brad Treliving. That was not Kyle Dubas. They re-signed Domi that offseason. And as much as Domi looked great, they never utilized him the same because it kind of came in a package deal with Tyler Bertuzzi that year. And sure, they were up against the cap, and sure, you could call that Dubas' fault because it was year one of Treliving. So a lot of the contracts were the same. We're year 3 now. This decor got insanely old, insanely quickly. You go from having one of the younger defensive cores, but albeit they're not that good, to the same level of skill in your defensive core, except they're all guys in their mid-30s. The Leafs are the Leafs went from one of the fastest teams in the league to one of the slowest in about 2 seasons. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. It feels like the Leafs, every time their fans or the media tells them to make a move, it almost feels like they're 3 years behind every single time. When the Leafs were young back in the 2016-17 season when they played the Capitals, everyone was telling them to get grittier. They're not going to compete with the Capitals in this era because they don't have the body, they don't have the weight. So what they need to do is they need to bring in guys that can do that and experience. Then they signed Patrick Marleau to one of the worst deals I've ever seen a GM make in hockey, and then promptly traded him away with a first round pick, which fantastic. Great job. And it wasn't until about the 2021-22 season where they finally realized, oh, maybe we should actually get bigger. And that's when you see guys like, they tried trading for Nick Foligno. That was obviously not going to work out there during the Montreal year. That year is the year that they traded for Mark Giordano, if I'm not mistaken. And he was coming off a Norris level season a couple seasons before that. I want to say 2019. And after the expansion to Seattle. And that team was a lot grittier. They had guys like Wayne Simmons. They had guys like Jason Spezza. They had those guys. And then that's when I think they kind of had their best mix. Albeit they lost to Tampa Bay, they went on to win the Stanley Cup. I will say, I don't like making excuses that year. I'll give them a pass. And then now you can see the shift in the NHL a little bit. You see teams like Buffalo and Detroit. And those teams have been in the kind of gutter for a long time, especially the Sabres. And now they're looking like cup contending teams. You could see what they're doing at the deadline. They're buying players. Buffalo got Logan Stanley and Luke Shen from Winnipeg. They got a bunch of other guys. Detroit got Justin Falk from St. Louis. Like, they're making moves. Then you look at the Ducks out west. You look at the Sharks, who are creeping up in that playoff spot era. You can see these teams, and these teams that could make runs, they're fast teams. So now you're left with a slow team, albeit they're tough, even though for some reason they don't like to show it. They're tough and they're big, but they can't move. Tough and big teams won 5 years ago. That was the way that it was trending. Now it's trending to a fast game again. And because the Leafs have already given up all of their assets, the only way that they're going to get young and fast is if they capitalize on their young talent, and Easton Cowan, soon to be Ben Vanford, Jacob Quillen, because for some reason we don't like playing him. We're drafting. Oh, wait. We don't have any picks. And the picks that we do have are going to end up in late round picks, not going to be panning out, and they're going to be late first rounders, which is basically the same as a second, third, fourth, or fifth rounder. Brad Treliving failed the team. He failed the team. And 3 guys wear this season. Number 1 is Brad Treliving, because he's the one who constructed this roster. He mismanaged the loss of Mitch Marner to a degree that I don't think I could have ever predicted. Albeit he brought in some good pieces. Oh my God, is this team not the same? And they went into this season identityless. Number 2 is Craig Berube. And I have a hard time giving it to Craig Berube on the fact that they won the division last year and he helped them significantly. If it wasn't for Craig Berube, they would not be in the playoffs deep past round 2. If it was Sheldon Keefe, they're losing against the Senators. Sorry. But this season, oh my God. This coach is unable to adjust to anything that is thrown his way. He's relying on his D-core, which is not nearly as good as it was in St. Louis. You had guys like Pietrangelo and Parenko back there. They're not walking through the door. You're left with Brandon Carlo, who I'm still convinced is a Boston sleeper agent the way he plays some nights. Morgan Riley, just got goosebumps saying his name. The only guy who's putting in a damn effort there is OEL, who's playing. Jake McCabe looks like a shell of his former self. And Chris Tanem's on the IR. And he's out till September. So you tell me, Craig, why aren't we adapting? For the slowest team, one of the slowest teams in the league, why are we not bringing in young talent? Tell me why. St. Louis wasn't the fastest team in 2019, but god damn it, they played good defense. This team is not even close. And Berube, I think, has had 1.5 feet out the door since the firing of Mark Savard. Because Berube is the one who brought him in. And the reason it took so long for them to make any sort of coaching change is because Berube was pushing for it. He was pushing for Mark Savard to stay. That power play, like, again, I don't know what's wrong with this team in the terms of fact that once a year, the power play is just unusable. Just forget it. Just decline the power play. I don't know what the problem is in terms of that. But Craig Berube has to go. Number 3, MLSC president, CEO Keith Belly. I have a tough time blaming him as well because he's been here for 2 years, 3 years, 3 years. I think 3 years. And it takes a long time to flip your president and CEO change. It doesn't happen overnight. And even after 3 years, it still doesn't happen the full way. But the responsibility lies on you in terms of one aspect. Why are you the president of 4 teams? I'm sorry. You could be the best president. You could be the best president. You could be the Masai Ujiri of the NHL. He was a great president for the Raptors. Nobody can do that for 4 franchises. Nobody. And when your attention is elsewhere, you're leaving Brad Treliving to do his work. And part of the reason why I have number 1 is because he's a scared GM. So you're leaving a scared GM alone who is known to not be able to make decisions with a coach who is not on the same page as him. And not only that, the coach is letting the inmates run the asylum a little bit. And you're the president. It's your job to make sure everything below you is in order. And right now, it's in chaos. So when Josh Kloke asks you at the TFC press conference about the Leafs, and you're telling him that it's not the time for that, well, when is the time? Because Toronto Maple Leafs are easily the most valuable franchise to MLSE as a company. It's easily the biggest and most valuable franchise in the National Hockey League. And you're in Toronto. Toronto is the mecca of hockey. Sorry, Montreal. Toronto's the mecca of hockey. If you can't answer a Toronto Maple Leafs question at your rare press conferences, then maybe you should be making more time for the Leafs, number 1, or hire a president who will. I'm not saying you're doing a bad job. I'm saying that the job is too hard for anybody. I don't know if I'd expect anybody to do that sort of job where you're managing 4 teams as president and running the business side of it all. I'm sorry, that's just too much of a workload for one person. I understand you want to get your own guys. I fully understand that. You didn't get rid of the guy, you got rid of the role. And that role played a crucial part in the success of this team. So, come this offseason, hire a president. And when you hire that president, you don't do what you've done in the last 5 years, where Brad Treliving comes on, okay, we're going to give Sheldon Keefe a try-it year and then fire him anyway, even though we knew he was going to get out the door anyway. You don't do that. And then you bring in Craig Berube, and you give it a try-it year, one final try-it year with Brendan Shanahan, and then you fire him anyway. Stop waiting for the answer to show itself in the results that you've already seen for the past 10 years. Fire them. It happens. Just because they're signed through a period of time does not mean you have to keep them for that period of time. They're not like players where you have to ask them out or trade them. They're not like that. You can simply fire them. So finally make that change and fire them. Thank you for your services. Thank you for the division win. Thank you for the good contracts with Tavares, Nyes, and Stolars. Goodbye. And let whatever president comes on pick their people. And then, if that doesn't work, then, if not already, you have to open the door to a Matthews trade. It's uncomfortable. It's the elephant in the room that nobody wants to look at. because that would mean complete failure. But if you're not going to win, like Keith Pelly said, you're here to win championships. You can't tell your fan base that everything other than winning championships is a failure. And then when you fail, you don't change anything. Because not changing anything is accepting the result that happened. And quite frankly, Leafs fans are tired of accepting this result.